Colors, am I right? I sure do like a color. Many colors, actually. Woo! Hey everybody, welcome to Nga. Yes, this was inspired by those, like, what color is every blank videos. I just had to know. So, a few months ago, I put out a Google Form survey asking people a harrowing question. What color is every phoneme in the International Phonetic Alphabet? I didn't provide any additional context. I didn't ask about what color the sound reminds you of, what color the shape of the symbol reminds you of, none of that. I just gave a list of every major phoneme on the IPA, consonants, vowels, clicks, implosives, and a hex color picker to choose what color each symbol was reminiscent of. And I received a whopping 125 responses. Yeah, that's a much smaller sample than in those viral videos, I'm sure, but honestly, I'm surprised anybody filled this out at all. There were 112 questions on this form. Why would anybody answer 112 questions about something so useless? Well, not many people did. I had the questions on the form randomized for every respondent, and I allowed the submitters to return to their form to add answers at their leisure for a month or so. Thanks to that, I got a nice, randomly spread average of about 62.7 responses per phoneme. Probably not enough of a sample source for a graduate thesis, but enough to get some good trend data to make a silly little YouTube video with it. Please don't kill me. Nonsense responses were not concluded in the data for obvious reasons. If you, for whatever reason, failed to follow the instructions and responded with the names of colors in words instead of hex values, I replaced them in bulk with hex values of a pretty stereotypical middle ground of what the internet considers that color to be. Special thanks, by the way, to the person who responded a color for every single question, all 112 of them. You're a true patriot. I also asked the submitters two required questions. What is your proficiency in reading and or writing phonetics with the International Phonetic Alphabet? And which of the top 22 most widely spoken languages in the world do you speak in at least a B1 or lower intermediate capacity? Makes sense why I'd ask these, right? Luckily, most people were at least decently proficient in the IPA, and by that I mean like 99% of them were at least decently proficient in the IPA. And for those who needed assistance, I provided a link to see the table, the one that has like the little buttons you can click and hear what each sound sounds like. And 124 of the 125 respondents said they were proficient in English. So keep that in mind here as these results come in with a nearly pure English speaker bias. Who knows, maybe L1 speakers of different languages will tend to think of different colors. Who knows? I don't. I didn't do that part in this video. Also, I forgot to include 6 of the phonemes in the original questionnaire, so I sent out a second form in February. Don't know how that happened, but it did. Sorry about that, do not flame me. So with all that out of the way, let's take a look at the results. Just kidding. This is what came out of a formula that I did incorrectly on Google Sheets. It only tabulated the first response from every question. So if you're going, holy shit, I was spot on, sorry. Sorry, no. This is what the results actually look like. A lot more mushy, right? Basically, the more sort of murky green-brownish it is, the less common agreement there likely is on a color. The more clear the color is, the more of a consensus people tend to have. Basically, these results were accomplished by taking the averages of every hex value. Is this the best way to discover consensus? You can debate that in the comments. It's certainly a perfectly fine way of finding consensus for R, G, and B values, but the visual result that comes out when you put it together as a full hex might not necessarily be like the perfect representation, but that's what we have for today, and that's what we're going with. Looking at the table here, you may be looking for patterns and even finding some. I will say I was pretty happy that it didn't look like pure randomness at least. Let's take a look at some of these potential patterns. First, to talk about the potential visual synesthesia, I have beamed in ZeWei using forbidden technology. Hey, ZeWei, it's time. You know the script. Come on, Grapheme away. Let's go.
Grapheme-color synesthesia. You're right, Agma, I do know the script because I wrote this part. Some people, me included, experience what's called grapheme-color synesthesia. Everyone's is a little different, but for me, stuff like letters, numbers, and some other concepts each have a very specific color associated with them in my brain. So we always picture T as a quiet blue, 6 as a formidable red, August as a distinct deep red violet, and Slovenia is green. Notably, if you also experience grapheme-color synesthesia, you might be strongly disagreeing with me on what colors those things are, and that's because, like I said, everyone's is different. But there are general trends that we normally see among English speakers. Generally, on average, B is blue, R is red, Y is yellow. This matches up with their color names. So for our cases here, I don't think it's a coincidence that most IPA glyphs that look like R all fit within a general red-orange spectrum. Even the rhotic vowel fits in here, though much browner, perhaps because it's not visibly R-shaped. The same color associations can be said for Y, where most Y-looking glyphs here are at least kinda yellow. Based on these averages, I'm also noticing general matches with E's, N's, A's, G's, K and Q as well. So to me, it's certainly showing that the general Latinness of the IPA symbols are indeed influencing this data here. But definitely not entirely. Back to the color names from earlier, I skipped B because glyphs that look like it are noticeably more purple than I'd expect. So the Latinness doesn't fully match up for all of them and indicates there might be something extra going on when letters are put in a linguistic context. In fact, some are wildly different than I expected, like Z's, which are normally black, and U's, which are considerably purple here, despite the general lack of agreement from the broader, less linguistic-centered census. I also got curious and made a scatter plot of the data where X is the hue and Y is the saturation of these average colors. It really shows the lack of blues that have been gathered from this survey, and I'm not sure why that would be. So if you've got any ideas, just let us know. I'm curious. But yeah, that's what I got after looking through this data. I think it's super interesting. I'm gonna go back to video editing and music making, because oh man, there's a lot for me to do. So I will see you later.
Alright. Thanks for that, ZeWei. I'll be honest, I wasn't even thinking of the visual aspect of this when I created the form, but the fact that this form was given to linguistics enthusiasts who could equally think of the graphemes as they would the phoneme sounds could potentially invalidate this whole report. I have an idea to fix that. I'll talk about it later. But for now, let's talk about the potential patterns from the sounds of phonemes. Let's take a look at the vowels first, because what we see here is a bit more easy to conceptualize. While there's a lot of brownish, greenish murk floating throughout the vowels, we do have a stronger preference for green in the mid vowels, most prominently A and E. There's a surprisingly strong preference for purple up in the close back corner of the vowel space, most prominently in oo and Then the last truly significant note is the strong set of red or red adjacent colors among the open vowels. A, aw are all the most prominent of these. And my beloved Schwa comes out as a fine, neutral, if slightly green murk. Not surprising. But as you know, there's much more to vowels than simple points in the vowel space that are denoted here. When Ætérnal saw this data, he wanted to see the full vowel space visualize. So he did some of his classic coding magic to create a visualization of the entire vowel space using the following process.
Alright everyone, Ætérnal here, time for a quick computer graphics interlude. Let's take a look at how it generated this vowel diagram here, shall we? Now the first thing we need is the format values of every vowel. The problem with this is that vowel phonemes don't actually have fixed values. They're generally slightly different cross-linguistically, and even between speakers of the same language. Now, I could have of course just booted up Praat and recorded all of them myself, but that would have been too much work. So instead I should like to thank Professor Bruce Hayes here for providing his format values for all the IPA vowels. Now that we have those, we can write a very simple OpenGL program that uploads all of this to the GPU and renders it. I'm not going to go into too many specifics of how I did this because that would both take too long and also not make make much sense to most of you. So for anyone who's really interested in the code, there's a GitHub link in the description. Alright, if we take all of the vowels and render them with the F1 on the y-axis and the F2 on the x-axis, we get this point cloud here. This should look a bit familiar to you. Next, we take all of this and turn it into a solid shape by computing the Delaunay triangulation of all of these points. Finally, we can fill in these triangles using an algorithm known as inverse distance weighting. Essentially, according to this algorithm, the color of a pixel is a weighted average of all the colors of all vowels, with more distant vowels contributing less of their color to the pixel. This fall-off is exponential and controlled by a parameter p. If we set this p to 3.5, we get this diagram I just showed you. But we can also pick a different value for p. For instance, if we set it to 1, all vowels contribute almost equally to the color of every pixel, which gives us this image on the left. This, of course, demonstrates that the average color of all vowels is this sort of ochre, beige, olive color or whatever it is. If you do the opposite and bump p all the way up to, say, 7, then pretty much the only vowel that has any influence whatsoever on the color of a pixel is its nearest vowel. In other words, most pixels just assume the color of their nearest vowel. This sort of illustration is also known as a Voronoi diagram. Now, if you're really interested in this sort of stuff and want to learn more about it, don't come to me, please. I'm really not a graphics programmer. I barely managed to get this to work. If you want to see some actual graphics programming done by actual graphics programmers, there's some videos here you can watch. I'll put the links in the description as well. Alright, that's enough from me. Agma, back to you.
So there you have it, the full vowel space visualized by the colors perceived on average by the brave fillers of this very large form. Moving on to consonants, let's look at the non-pulmonic consonants first, as it's much simpler. If we look at them in a vacuum, it looks like there's a general pinkish reddish trend for the bilabials, whether click, implosive, or ejective. Similarly, a sort of turquoisey, turtle shelly vibe emerges for both the dental click and the dental alveolar ejective. The dental alveolar implosive is significantly more green, which is interesting, until you see that the palatal and velar implosives are also much greener than the average neutral murk. Otherwise, there's not much to say about the patterns within the non-pulmonic specifically, but I'll be bringing them up again in the context of consonants as a whole. So, let's take a look at the full consonant chart. The first thing that jumps out to me is the maroon-pink purpleness found throughout the bilabial consonants. This extends to the bilabial non-pulmonics as well. Even the bilabial implosive fits pretty well into this color scheme, though it's on the gray end of that spectrum. Maybe the greenness of being implosive murked up the purpleness of bilabial placing? You could maybe make an argument that there's a physical origin in the color tendency for the bilabials, that being the general color scheme of many human lips matching up with this scheme relatively well. This is all complete conjecture though, don't cite me in a scientific paper saying that though. I should mention this because a couple of my videos have actually been mentioned in real scientific papers. Don't do that for this one. Please, don't do that for this one. Anyway, moving on to the labiodentals. Things are quite gray in this limited category. Remember though, brown is the color that denotes a general lack of consensus for the most part. Or at least it tends to. Who knows, maybe everyone chose brown on one specific one. It's impossible to tell. At least in the case of the labiodental nasal and the labiodental approximate, it seems that people genuinely chose colors closer to gray. F deviates from the labiodental scheme by being greener than the others, while V shows much more red influence while still being relatively grayish. This doesn't mean much in the labiodental context, but in a minute I'll get to a possible pattern. Because the chart is built this way, let's look at the dental, alveolar, and post-alveolar column as kind of one block. At a first glance, it looks like it's all over the place, just chaos, but it's pretty obvious that there's a particular rhotic elephant in the room here. The trill, tap, and approximate all have strong reddish tendencies. If we zoom out and look at the other rhotic consonants across the chart, you can see that in one way or another, this pattern continues in a very obvious way. Every rhotic phoneme is some kind of red light color, with the alveolar trill being the most orange adjacent, and the uvular trill and fricative being the most I don't know, maroony. Some people in the Big Lang chat mentioned that they may have chosen more red-like colors because the word red starts with R. But again, this is pure speculation. Makes sense though. Now back to the alveolar column. If you remove the rhotics, there is a bit of a greenish turquoisish pattern. This includes the non-pulmonics, where you can see again the significant turquoise tendency in the dental click and in the dental alveolar ejective, and a true green in the voiced alveolar implosive. There are some major exceptions to this pattern though. First, n is pretty brown, but more on the tan end of the spectrum. Whether or not this is a conscious choice or a mixture of many disagreements, it does fit into the color scheme of the nasals pretty well. Looking at the nasal row, you can see a pattern of warmer brown tan colors from alveolar to velar. These sort of mid-mouth nasals all came out as a bit of a set of their own. Another exception amongst the alveolars is z, which comes out nearly as red as the alveolar tap. This may look sort of random, but if we take a step back, a pattern here emerges too. Look at the voiced retroflex fricative. It's nearly maroon. My personal theory here, don't get your hopes up, university students, personal theory is that this redness comes from how similar z and zh are phonetically to the other rhotics. In fact, both of these are used as rhotics, albeit with variations of tongue shape from their most common forms in multiple languages around the world, and are transcribed into the Latin alphabet using the letter R. I think Mandarin, Czech, some dialects of Basque, it's a thing, I promise. Then there's duh, which is much closer to the murkiness of disagreement than its voiceless counterpart tuh. Looks like a fluke, but if we zoom out and look at all of the voiced consonants that contrast with the voiceless ones at the same place of articulation, there's a bit of a pattern. For the most part, the voiced consonants are darker and browner than their voiceless counterparts. These shades of brown could suggest more disagreement amongst the voiced consonants, so not much can confidently be gleaned from this, but the tendency of being darker shades is certainly notable. I guess people tend to consider the voiced consonants to be darker than the voiceless ones. Onto the retroflex column. Here we see murkier results, but an overall tendency to be more reddish than the alveolars or palatals surrounding them. The main exception here is the retroflex lateral approximant la, which is a nearly perfect gray, but oddly with a bit of a blue tendency in there. This seems like a pretty weird exception out of the whole chart. If we look at the lateral row as a whole, there is a bit of a tendency among the four. They're all cool colors, ranging from the blue-green la to the dark purple velar la. In that way, the subtle blueness of the retroflex lateral ever so slightly fits in, I guess. Adding in the lateral fricative row, the cool color pattern persists, and we can see the most similarly colored phonemes to the retroflex, that being the voiceless lateral fricative, hla, which is also nearly gray, but a bit more blue-green. All I can say about this is that the general populace thinks lateral sounds in general are cool, and I tend to agree. As for the retroflex column as a whole, I can't really think of any possible justifications for the redder neutral color scheme, except that it could be a transition between alveolar and velar. I say this ignoring the palatals. Why? Well, the palatal column is noticeably the most yellow of the places of articulation. Well, more like a yucky, yellow-green, rotting fruit kind of color scheme. But the most significant of these is the approximate ya, which is an obvious yellow. Well, not like yellow, but much, much more yellow than any other phoneme by quite a bit. Another possible English speaker's bias is here, as this is the first sound in the word yellow. It's interesting though that this yellow-green tendency continues through the palatals, suggesting it could be more than just the word yellow doing it. Though, conversely, it's also possible that the palatal sounds in general just all remind English speakers of the ya in yellow, and it infects the entire place of articulation. So wait, how about the non-pulmonics then? Ah yes, the palato-alveolar click and the palatal implosive are both a yucky, dark yellow-green. Overall it fits, but they're the darkest of the palatals. Onto the velars, we have a mix of various warm browns. The exceptions to this are g and the velar implosive which are both greenish and darker hues than the notably quite orange k. This fits the pattern of voiced consonants being darker. The color difference between k and g is the most stark of any of the voiceless voice pairings on the chart though. K is very warm, while g is on the verge of being cool. We already talked about the velar lateral's notable purple color and the possible reason for it. I just wanted to point out I'd consider the velar column to be the only one with a truly tripolar color scheme. In other words, the only one with 3 colors I'd consider relatively pronounced and different from the others. Like a burnt orange on one end, a puke green next to it, and a bruised purple on the other end. Beautiful velar imagery. Just picture those colors. What in real life do you see with all those colors together? It's pleasant. Sewage, more rotting fruit. The best consonant of all time, ng, comes with an absolutely neutral, if slightly warm brown, by the way. The uvulars are notably quite red. A much more vibrant rosy red than the neutral lip-like bilabials. Perhaps people quite literally thought of the human uvula, which is often of similar colors to what we see here, maybe? More pleasant imagery. The reddest are the rhotics, which fits into that rhotic pattern mentioned earlier. Strangely, the exception here is the voiced uvular plosive ba. This follows the same pattern as the velar plosives. A warm voiceless plosive is paired with a much cooler voiced plosive. The voiced uvular still qualifies as warm, unlike g, but it is so dulled and neutral that I have to look at that and assume that whatever people were thinking about g tended to coincide with their thoughts about ba. The uvular implosive is a very dark maroonish gray. This makes it a very similar, but warmer, version of the implosive velar, following the same pattern as the velar yet again. Maybe g and the other G-like consonants remind people of the word green, and that's how this whole phenomenon emerged. It would fit the pattern with red and yellow. Honestly, maybe the bilabials, like p, just reminded people of the word purple. Maybe I'm just thinking too deeply about this whole scenario, and people just did it based on what the letters kind of looked like and the colors that start those letters. Maybe. Moving on, the pharyngeals are both warm browns, and as usual, the voiced pharyngeal fricative is darker than its voiceless counterpart, fitting in with the pattern. There's not much else I could say here. The glottal sounds are very neutral, but notably paler and closer to grays and tans than the brown of disagreement. It seems that people genuinely found the glottal stop quite gray, and the glottal fricative h as quite pale. And yet again, the voiced glottal fricative is darker than the voiceless. I personally imagine the glottal sounds as the most bland of speech sounds, as they're some of the closest we have to just kind of breathing and coughing and sighing. So maybe they're just so bland because of this. Who knows? And finally, let's just take a little speed round to look at the other symbols to see where they fit in. Yeah, Daryl has lots of thoughts about the other symbols. Oh, okay. Oh, really? What are your thoughts? Tell me more. Go on. Schwa is decisively gray. Wa is quite purple, seemingly making a decent link between the bilabials and the velar liquids, of which wa applies to both. The voiced labial palatal approximant, I have a tough time with that one. Yeah. The voiced labial palatal approximant, is just brown, a slightly paler and warmer version of disagreement brown. The voiceless epiglottal fricative is a dark, warm brown. The voiced epiglottal fricative is a bit darker and a bit redder, still technically fitting the voiceless voice pair tendency. The epiglottal plosive, I hate these symbols, they're so similar. They're so similar, even though one's a fricative and one's a plosive. Why do they do that? Anyway, and the epiglottal plosive is a dark reddish brown. Taking these epiglottal sounds as a group, they're all warm, dark brown, not very distinct from the pharyngeals. The alveolar lateral flap is perhaps the perfect example of disagreement brown. Maybe nobody knows what this sounds like. I don't know. Like, if you consider it a rhotic, it totally breaks that rhotic reddish rule. Which is why I think it's a fluke personally. But it's also very tenuous to even call it a rhotic. It's just like a flap. Anyway, the simultaneous sh-ha sound, sh, is a sort of slightly cool gray-green brown. Conveniently, this looks like what would happen if you made paint out of the sh and h symbols and mixed them together. So I'm going to call that a pattern. You can't stop me. Then there are also the alveolar palatal fricatives, sh and zh, which follow the voiceless voice pairing pattern, right? Interestingly though, sh is prominently a light green with some yellow, like sa or sha. A perfect match for what it is, honestly. While zh, oh god, I can't even... Well, the voiced one is a warm pale brown with much more red influence. Perhaps this follows my theorized association with Z-like fricatives and rhotics. Who knows? And finally, we have one of my favorite phonemes of all time. It's a rhotic, and it has an obvious red mixture in it. But this is a vowel. Does it fit into the vowel space at all? No, not really. I guess a nearby vowel to schwa that comes out to be similar would be strut or Maybe British people responding to the form thought of the presence of in many American English dialects, and it's often more like form in British dialects, I guess. I really have no idea. It's just much easier to say that the redness of rhotics was just strong enough to spread to the rhotic schwa. And that's pretty much all I have to say for now. Let me know if you're seeing any patterns that ZeWei and I didn't mention. I'm genuinely interested to see what other people notice. Because this form could have equally made people ponder the visuals of the phonemes graphemes or their associated sounds, it's very possible that people filled out this form with very different thoughts in mind when deciding on colors. To rectify this, I would like to put out a form where you are forced to simply listen to the phoneme sound and then choose a color without having any visual representation. I have not made this yet, so if you want me to make this form to try and get a new set of results and see how it compares, then definitely let me know in the comments, because I have not made it yet. But tell me, if you're interested, I'll make it happen. I'll give it a little snippety snap. I'll make it a reality, so just keep that in mind. And that's pretty much all I got for you. As usual, I would like to thank the Matrons and YouTube members who helped me pay for the website and the Minecraft server and the other various expenses that go into the making of this channel and community. Matrons get access to the Nguhcraft Minecraft server, can provide memes for this green screen, have access to the secret Discord chat, get to see comic pages and other sneak peeks of my stuff early when it happens, can be judges in the cursed conlang circus if they want to, can ask me for conlanging advice if they so desire, and whatever other benefits I may have time to give them in the future. Again, the busy times are not over yet. The busy times are just about to get busy, okay? So this is about to be a really crazy time in my life. I mentioned this in the previous video. I'm getting this out now. I have a lot of other projects that are underway at the moment, but it might be a bit, it might be a little bit. If not, then I'll be getting as much as I can out before the peak of the summer arrives, because I have a feeling that by the time it's the end of the summer, I'm gonna be like so deep in the zone, I'm barely gonna have time to do anything. This fall is going to be rough. What does that mean for the Cursed Conlang Circus announcement and stuff like that? I do not know. Don't pressure me too hard about it. There will be a CCC5. I just have no idea when I'm gonna announce it and like schedule the submission period and judging period and all that. Haven't even thought about that yet. I'm gonna cross that bridge when I have crossed several of the other important bridges in my real life that I have to cross like as soon as possible. So it's coming though. So yeah. Anyway, until next time, Nga is out. Or wait. Until next time, Nga is out. You wanted cellar door? That's cellar door for you right there.